Namaskar. Welcome to the afternoon session. In the morning session, there was an excellent paper on what may be called a gender inquiry into three texts as mentioned in the Vedantic tradition, namely the Upanishads, and then Param Pujya Adi Shankaracharya's comments on certain aspects. And from that, a discourse was developed that gender cannot be specific to any attainment of knowledge, because attainment of knowledge is independent of the status, the social status, or color, or any other location of the individual. And then in that analysis, however, there was some kind of a rather apologetic situation about the classical system of India in which the Varna ashram was posited. And then I made a kind of extensive response which almost became a talk in itself about how we should look at this very crucial problem that faces us today in India. Namely, how to look upon our own ancient system, social system, which existed for a long time. Now, currently there is this whole discourse that this was a hierarchical society in which there is no equality. You see, in which some people are considered low by birth, and that this is a form of injustice. Now, this is a modern critique of ancient societies, not just in India, but anywhere in the world. But specifically to India, it is claimed that as compared to other places like Greece, which is now kind of almost digested by the rest of Europe as Western culture, that this problem has been solved in the sense that there is full faith in equality, liberty, and fraternity. You see, three major values. Whereas in India, this problem subsists because of Hinduism, and Hinduism is to be defined by Varna. Of course, in modern times, they don't talk of ashram, whereas any Smriti or any old order does not talk of just Varna, but Varna ashram dharma. You know, the four stages of life, namely brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. The four stages, the four ashramas, or the four grounds on which life of a social human being rests. That's why it's an ashray, and therefore it is an ashrama. That is not mentioned now in modern discourse, but only the Varna is mentioned. Now, the critique of this has been on for almost 150 years, let's say, since the advent of the British incursion into India, the critique has been there, let us say, from 1770 onwards. And later on also, people have defined this as a problem because it is in contrast to the modern European values of equality, liberty, and fraternity. Now, Dumézil, one of the famous Western anthropologists, defined Indian culture or the Hindu Indian as homo hierarchicus. That is the man who believes in hierarchy. But then his definition of homo hierarchicus was not just in terms of criticism. He, as an anthropologist, had defined that all societies throughout history have believed in hierarchy of human beings. Now, the question is, how do we deal with this thing today? You see, today it has become, first of all, a guilt complex. That there is something wrong. There is something wrong with Hinduism or Hindu ideals, and Hinduism is equal to hierarchy. And if it is equal to hierarchy, then it is not capable of admitting the value of equality. Then there can be no equality. And if there is no equality, especially because of birth, then there will be no fraternity. Because if somebody is up, higher up, and somebody is lower up, then you cannot mix around on equal grounds. So, equality and fraternity are not possible. And if equality and fraternity are not possible, then liberty to choose, liberty to act, liberty to claim a status in society is also denied. So this is the modern critique. Now, the very idea about equality of men or equality of man as born is for the first time stated in Rousseau. All men are born equal. They have nothing to lose but their chains. So he most strongly, of course there are other authors like Auguste Comte and others during that period, but this is the Enlightenment period in Europe when there is a rejection of status by birth. Till this time in Europe, society was divided largely into two sections. The royal, those who were high-born, and those who were serfs or the low-born. And perhaps this was the order in Europe, even in ancient Greece, even in Egypt, where there were only two classes, the ruler and the ruled. There was very little, hardly any of the middle class. In Europe, the middle class, the money lending class were the Jews, who were again in no way accepted as equals. So they were also rejects. So the background of European society, where they had only the ruler and the ruled and no middle class, at the advent of the mercantile revolution, when it pushed a social change, then it pushed a change in favor of bringing the classes together, an emergence of a new middle class. You see, the new middle class emerges, and this middle class was a business community, and this happens especially after the Renaissance, which means when the Turks had invaded Greece and occupied it, and when so much of literature and classical learning flowed into Europe. and technology brought about big changes in the social system of Europe, and the new economic class started emerging. So, acquiring a status for the middle class. But traditionally, as there was no middle class, so a whole system had to be devised, and a system of thought had to be devised to bring in the middle class, make them respectable, make them acceptable. Earlier, somebody from a middle class would have to marry somebody who was a little higher up, or who had a kind of a little touch of the royalty, and then acquire a status in spite of money. So, there is the classic example of William Shakespeare, who married a rich lady, Anne Hathaway, and then became respectable, had money, and he made more money through his theatre. So this is one aspect of European society, when it culminates in a full declaration in Rousseau that all people are born equal. In other words, there is social mobility which is accepted there. Earlier it could not be mobility. It was according to birth. Either you were high-born or you were low-born. So Europe was following, all societies all over the world were following this system, that status was according to birth. But because there was enlightenment in Europe, and then enlightenment of Europe, when the Europeans came to India, especially Europeans as rulers or as enlightened people, and when they considered themselves as having a burden of enlightening Indians or other dark people, the non-white people, then they propagated what was called the white man's burden, or the new learning, a new system of thought, something which was not static, something which was not oriental, something which was not unequal. So you see, this was a whole discourse of the European class when it came to invade India, Africa, and various other regions of the world. So you see, this is where colonization begins. It's primarily an activity of colonization which started sizing up African and Asian societies. So in sizing up the Indian society, they said that Indian society is divided into classes. Then a whole discourse was developed that Islam does not believe in hierarchy. And a retrofitting and a rewriting of Islamic vision was done by 19th century Islamic people, that Islam also believes in equality of men. Now this was not true at all. Neither in the Arabic history nor in the ruling classes of medieval Muslim aristocracy. See, they never believed that people are born equal. Islamic society was also divided very clearly into three. The high-born, who were called Ashraf. See? Then there was something which was close to the middle class, working class, and that was called Ajlaf. And then those who were very poor in the working class, and they were called Arzal or Zalil. So people were divided into social class in Islamic societies also, and this is how it was. And you still have a distinction between the Arabic Muslim and the non-Arabic Muslim prevalent to this day. For instance, all the Arab Muslims believe that the leader of Islam can only be from the Arab world. So the Mustafa, or the leader, can only be from the Islamic world. In fact, it can't be even from Pakistan. It has to be from Arab. That is why you have today the leader of ISIS called Baghdadi. He has claimed himself as the Mustafa, or the head of Islamic world, and he is doing jihad for it. Nobody has claimed it from Pakistan, and nobody can according to Islamic theology. You see, these are some of the things we must understand in detail when we especially think about Indian history and about modern discourse as to what is the analysis of modern India and what are different scholars of different traditions saying about it. Now, in the 19th century, when there was this big impact of the European thought on India, in which Indian society was considered to be a hierarchical society, an unequal society, and therefore a dark society, there was in many ways a reaction to it from India. So what was the reaction? Now the reaction of a man who is defeated is different from the reaction of a man who is independent or who is self-governed. India at that time was not self-governed. India had been more or less subjugated by the British by the end of the 18th century. And India had been subjugated for several centuries before that by the Islamic rulers for most part of the, in most part of the country. Therefore, we had a very apologetic attitude. And the apologetic attitude was that we claimed that we had those two qualities by which the Christian whites thought themselves to be superior. So when the superior Europeans claimed, our rulers, when they, and those who brought so-called enlightenment into India, when they claimed that these are the two great qualities which we have and which India doesn't have, then India or Hindus also started saying, no, we do also have these two qualities. And what are these two qualities? Number one, that we believe that all men are born equal, because we believe in one Atma, we believe in Brahma, Sarvamidam Khalu Brahma, everything is Brahma, we believe that, right? You don't believe it, but we believe in it, and therefore we believe in the equality of all beings, we believe in the equality of all religions, we believe in the equality of all human races, we believe in the equality of all human cultures. Now this was essentially the idea which was put in as a reaction. And the writings and the speeches of Vivekananda, they most clearly, in his Chicago speech and later on, they take this attitude. That because everything is Brahma, so whole idea of a Brahman being higher, a Brahman being unequal or at the top is not what we have believed. We have believed that all human beings are capable of enlightenment, that they are all equal. In terms of social activity, they may have to do different activity. So you see, this was the discourse which was here. At the same time, there was another important factor, which was monotheism. Christians came up and they said, look, you believe in too many gods. You are polytheists. Polytheism means, poly in Greek means many, right? And mono means one. So monotheism, that is those who believe that there is only one theos. Theos is translated into German and English as God. So one God only. So the idea of one God was presented as the true eye of truth. And the idea that there are many gods was presented as a false idea. Now, this was the Christian prejudice, the Islamic prejudice, that there is only one God. To believe that there can be many gods is wrong. So, the Indian discourse in reaction became something like this, that yes, we do believe in many gods, but those are many in appearance, in reality they are one. Huh? So this was the discourse, that yes, we believe in many gods, but actually behind the appearance of those many, we believe in one. So this was the discourse which developed. Then there was a third. You see, this is all very important to understand what has happened to India in last 150 years. And if you listen to what I am saying and carefully think of it, then you will understand that why the Supreme Court of India gave the judgment it did in Sabarimala. You see? That the Supreme Court of India did the great outrage of telling you that you are practicing a prejudice against women, and that menstruation has been considered in India as unholiness, as something unclean. And therefore women are not allowed to go into the temple in the unclean period, and hence you are discriminating against women, hence you are not in favor of gender justice. Now all this does not follow the proper Indian tradition. You see, you go and ask the most learned person today in India, including some swamis, and they will say, yes, there is an impurity for 3 days or 4 days or 5 days even. Now I often ask people, what is the Indian term for menstruation? Rajaswala. Right? Somebody in whom the Raja is showing in form of blood, which is emanating for 3-4 days, and showing as Raja. Now Raja, or being Rajasic, is not something bad in our tradition. Raja, is a Raja bad? It's the same root. Raja. So Raj is power. So Rajaswala is somebody who is exhibiting her power to procreate, her power to be Janani, her power to multiply the human race. So in Sanskrit, Rajaswala does not mean impurity. It does not at all mean. It signifies something which is to be venerated. So people say, well, if it is to be venerated, why do you keep them away? Now, keeping away is different. You keep your child away. A very little child, you don't put the child for 40 days. You don't take the child outside. See, because you want to protect. So while in the Rajasana stage, the woman is exhibiting her power, signifying her power. She is also vulnerable in certain ways, and therefore she is kind of put away, excluded, given a status where she will not do what she has to do throughout the day. And this was done in different cultures. If you want to go into detail, there is a new book by Nitin Sridhar on this. It was practiced in ancient Greece, in Europe, among the Celts and various other cultures. In fact, in my 1994 book, I have 2 pages on it as to how it was done in the Greek and the ancient Indian culture. So, not understanding the logic of a philosophy and imposing the logic of a different cultural philosophy is what creates a conflict of civilizations. See, this is where the conflict arises. So for those cultures in which venerating the procreative power is not important, but having a worker in office at the same 10 o'clock from 10 to 5 and providing her with a menstrual pad so that she can travel, do the work, and drumming up the whole thing as freedom so that she can work for 8 hours. Because in modern culture, in modern technological system, what is more important than a worker? Somebody who is there in a factory or in an office or in an economy which produces. Our values are not the values of ancient Greeks or ancient Indians, where you don't think that money making is the most important thing. Our values today are that you must work, make money, and even taking 1 hour, what to talk of 3 days, is wrong. And so you look upon the whole thing in a different manner. See, these are civilizational values. Now coming back to the 3 prejudices that the Europeans had in the 19th century when they came to India. Number 1, monotheism. That monotheism is better than polytheism. Now this was a prejudice which the Jews had. The Jews passed it on to the Christians. The Christians passed it on to Islam. Islam made it more stringent. That worshipping one God only, no other. Right? The Jews were polytheistic, but after Moses returned from Egypt, he learned worship of one God only from the Egyptians. And then he's imposed that worship of one God only on the Jews. And then the Jews said there is only one God, which is Yahweh. And Yahweh does not have a wife. Earlier, Yahweh also used to have a wife. Now it's very important. There's a big difference between somebody is God who does not have a wife. God with a wife and without a wife are two different things. Followers of God without a wife behave differently. Followers of a God with wife or wives behave very differently. This is obvious when you study the history of different cultures. African cultures, Australian culture. Now there is no bar to a wife or a husband or a sexual relation of a god to another god or a human being in either the ancient Greek system or the Vedic system or the later Indian system. The later Indian system, the post-Vedic, gods always have wives. There can be no God without a wife. Otherwise that God is useless. He has no power there. Shivaha Shaktya Yukto Yadi Bhavati Shaktaha Prabhavitum Nachedevam Devo Nachedevam Devo Khalu Kushalaha Spanditumapi. He cannot move even. If Shiva is with Shakti, then Shaktya yukto yadi bhavati Shaktaha, then he is powerful. If he does not have Shakti, then he cannot move, he is useless. Nachedevam devo nakhalu kushalaha spanditum api, वो हिल भी नहीं सकता. Shiva cannot even move. Therefore, when Shakti has dissociated herself from Shiva, he is a Shava. And that is why Kali is dancing on the top of a Shava. See, that is the image, that is the meaning. So in the whole Indian system, strength, power, Shakti, creativity, Prakriti, all is feminine. And if there is no God, if there is no Shakti, if there is no woman, then the God is unacceptable. Now we do have the Vedic gods, but like Surya and Pushan and Agni, but nobody imagined them as single. Although there are no images of their wives, etc., or pantheon or mantras in the Vedic Samhitas, but still they are not imagined as singles. They are not imagined as singles. And you become a single or a brahmachari for a certain purpose. See? So the idea of a God who is without a woman, if worshipped that way, creates an entirely different culture. It creates a culture in which women have very little rights and power. And this was true of Christianity and Islam. Islam has still not come out of that syndrome. Christians came out of that syndrome in around the 19th century. They started coming out of that syndrome, and to this day there has been no woman president of the United States of America. You see, all these philosophies have a practical impact on how your culture conducts itself. So, coming back to 19th century, the Indian discourse that we believe in one God, we believe in Nirgun Brahma. Sarvavidam Khalu Brahma, Vedantik Brahma, Vedanta, Upanishad, Brahmavad. Brahmavad became very elevated. And slowly, a prejudice was imbibed from Christians against worship of Saguna, or worship of Murti, or worship of Pratima, or worship of temples, or worship of Saguna Upasana. And its first manifestation was Dayanand Saraswati. So Dayanand Saraswati says that there is no temple worship in Vedas. So let us go back to Vedas, or let us adopt the Vedic system in which we will not do any worship of a murti in a temple, but we will only give oblations to different devatas like Agni and Indra and Surya and Pushan through the Vedic mantras. And Dayanand Saraswati went a step further to say that these are different names of one single Supreme Father, Param Pita Parmeshwar. So if you read a translation of Dayanand Saraswati, of the Rig Veda or other three Vedas included, then all the gods are translated into Param Pita Parmeshwar. So if there is a mantra on a certain god, Agnimide Purohitam, the first line, then Agni is translated there as Param Pita Parmeshwar. if you take any other mantra, Pavakana, Saraswati, then Saraswati is translated as Parampata Pita Parameshwar. Or some nirguna quality of intellect or something like that. So, under the impact of Christian monotheism and bias against idol worship, or what the Christians called idol worship, they started claiming themselves to be the true monotheists. And then of course we had Brahmo Samaj in Bengal, and they said we will not worship Murti. So when the young Vivekananda went to Ramakrishna and he said he is worshipping Kali, so he was horrified. But it is only when Ramakrishna gave him a little touch and he realized that there is something more than just thinking, when he had maybe some slight experience of pranothan in his body, Vivekananda, then he said, there is something else which I can't understand just by arguing or philosophical speculation. Right, Swamiji? Huh? तो स्वामी जी तो अनुभूति है, तो इसलिए वो समझती. तो Vivekananda said, all right, I'll believe you. But still he was uncomfortable with Kali all his life. And you still don't discover Kali in Ramakrishna mission. You only discover, you see, Ramakrishna and the mother and Ramakrishna, Shardama. Because they never accepted polytheism. They never accepted worship of the divine as Saguna. And Dayanand Saraswati and all Arya Samajis and all the great so-called reformers and Mahatma Gandhi and all these people, they forget the fact that all Vedic devatas are Saguna. They have a naam, they have a rupa, they have preferences, right? Somebody is dark, somebody is bright, somebody is male, somebody is female. So if everything which you imagine and which you pay oblations to is non-nirguna, is saguna, then how can you believe and say that we are also monotheists? See, this has been one of the biggest mistakes of Indian philosophy since 19th century, which now needs to be corrected. The second thing, apart from monotheism, as I said, is the Varna ashram. And third was then, therefore, the method of worship or worship in the temple. So when there was this guilt complex about the system of worship, Hinduism became tarnished and it was seen as a backward religion. And once you acquire this complex of being a backward person, then you lose self-esteem. Now my other question is, what did you really lose? You lost, or we lost, one of the most beautiful things that we had in history. In the Indian system, there is no exclusiveness, because the ultimate or the divine or the Brahma is nirguna and saguna at the same time. And tradition has been saying this throughout. It has been saying it in the Vedic mantras. You all know the famous Ekam Sat mantra, which says that Agnim and various other gods, they are in reality one. In other words, you accept the diversity and the manifestation and the creation as much as you accept the Creator. You see, according to the Christian system, thank you, according to the yes, warm water. According to the Christian system, creation is separate from the Creator and it is inferior. God created creation, but you cannot worship creation. You can worship God only. You can worship Allah only in the Islamic system, but you cannot worship what has been created by God. So creation is separate from the Creator. And because the creation has naam and roop, creation, this sansar, this world, has many shapes and forms. It is in time, it is in space, and therefore the human beings are in time and space. Therefore there can be no relationship between the Creator and the created, between the divine and human. Because they are separate. Now, Christians have a philosophic difficulty all the time. If they are asked a question, how is it that God had a son? And God, he was born as a son, and he's a son. Is he creation? Is he part of creation? They say no. He is not part of creation. Because Jesus, the only and the one Son of God, because God never had any other son or daughter, and God had it only once, and God had it without a wife, and God does not have a wife or a brother or a sister. God is only a son, and one-time son. God is not going to have a son again. And he of course sent this son. Why did God do this? He had a son so that the son could come down and die for us. Die and suffer. Why did he have to die? Why did he have to suffer? Because he had to pay for the sins of humanity. What was the sin that humanity had done? Humanity had disobeyed God. Disobeyed God by eating the apple. And the apple, which excited tremendous sexual desire in Adam and Eve, and therefore they were cursed. And therefore their progeny is always born in sin. And because they had sinned through disobedience and through sexual intercourse, therefore Jesus had come and to suffer and die and then go back to heaven. And Jesus is not part of creation. It was only an intervention. He is never part of creation. Therefore you worship the cross. You don't make a murti of Jesus. Right? You only make a sketch of Jesus. Now that's another question, that Christianity allows two-dimensional painting but does not allow three-dimensional murti. Why? See, this is again a problem with Christianity and Christian theology. But all this problem is because there is a distinction between the Creator and the created. The creation and the created are different. Now, because the creator and the created are different, therefore God and man is different. Therefore no man can say Aham Brahmasmi, either in the Christian world or in the Muslim world. So when Mansur al-Hallaj said Anal Haq, I am Haqiqat, or I am the Kainat, I am the creation, Haqiqat, I am truth. I am the truth. They slaughtered him. He said, how can you be the truth? Allah alone can be the truth. So there is a distinction between the human and the divine. There is a barrier. If you contrast this with the ancient Greek and the Vedic systems, then you find that in the Vedic system or in the ancient Greek system, there is no such distinction. Zeus, the highest of the gods in the Greek pantheon, he is all the time making love to human women, procreating progeny. He impregnated Leda in the form of a swan and created a divine child, a child which then became one of the demigods. So interaction between the created and the creator is possible. It's part of truth. It's part of reality. And similarly, in the Hindu world, there is avatarana, descent, avatar, coming down. Now, avatar, where did the Christians get this avatar from? Where did Christians get the idea of Jesus, not as a prophet but as a son? Because the Jews had so many prophets, but they did not have a son. The Old Testament does not have a son of God. It's only the New Testament, the Christian Testament, Luke and Mark and Luther and others. So, the idea that there can be a son was taken by the Christians from the Greeks. But partially, very hesitatingly, and as a one-time affair. And because they could never answer the question logically as to why, if it is God, then he can do it only once. Right? And if he is God, then why is he not creation also? If he is the creator, then why is the creator different, distinct from creation? Why does he have no control over creation or total control over creation? For instance, God has no control over Lucifer. भाई शैतान के ऊपर तो भगवान का कोई बस नहीं. Shaitan is constant. Lucifer is there. He is the devil. God cannot wipe him out. God cannot control him. God can only put him in the last circle of hell. But Rama could control Ravana and give him mukti, which means he became one with God. See, in the Hindu system, there can be no distinction. Even Ravan is not denied admission to God. Ravan is given mukti. When Rama killed Ravana, what does that killing mean? He did not send him to hell. Ravan is not living in Narak. And even Bali, who is in the underworld, is not in Narak. He is not suffering. He has gone there and he comes up and he goes there. He is still there. He is still part of creation. You see the difference between two philosophic systems? And therefore, if God cannot accept one who has quote unquote sinned, Therefore, the people of God will also not accept those who don't accept God. And hence the concept of heathen. That I am a Christian, you are a heathen. You will suffer hellfire. About 10 years ago, I went into one of those interfaith dialogues. There are interfaith dialogues going on all over the world. I had an interfaith dialogue with Dana Miriam also about several years ago. So I went to this conference in Greece, and as soon as I landed in this beautiful island, I saw some other delegates coming in. There was this huge man, American, big, burly. And the moment he saw me, he just came up and he almost pounced on me and said, "Dear friend, I tell you, I love you. And therefore I want you to give up the path of evil and take up the true path of Christ." So I said, "Dear friend, I love you more than you love me. Therefore I want to leave you to the path of your Jesus and leave me to the path of my Vishnu. Please don't try to take away from my path. Let's continue both on our paths." Now, this is the reality. You see, philosophic doctrines, once you deeply go into them, then you see how the cultural differences come. You see, our Swamiji was very profound in talking about these distinctions. And I remember, I think it was in almost 10 years or 12 years ago, he had two Hindu-Jewish dialogues.
Yes.
The first Hindu-Jewish dialogue was held in Israel. The second was held in Delhi for 5 days. And I was part of the small team Swamiji had made for the Hindus to argue and discuss things with the Jewish rabbis. So what I'm talking from the whole tradition of the philosophers like Swamiji making these philosophic distinctions as to what is there in the doctrine. And how this doctrine has to be seen in life. So the philosophic distinction and the philosophic belief has cultural consequences. We developed in India since Jawaharlal Nehru's time this whole doctrine of Sarv Dharm Sambhav. That let us have a good feeling towards, of equality towards all religions or philosophic systems. Now, all religions are equal in the sense that they all offer you a way of reaching divine. They are equal, but then they are not the same. And if they are not the same, then their consequences are not going to be the same. So therefore, some will practice the doctrine of punishing the ungodly. That is, punishing God, those who don't believe in the God in which I believe. Therefore, the difference between Christianity, Islam, Indian Hindu system, ancient Greek system, or the ancient Egyptian system, or the ancient Chinese system. They have to be assessed in terms of cultural consequences. Each philosophic system has a cultural consequence. And if we talk of equality now, then do you think it is correct to grant that you can have a belief that those who don't believe what Christians believe will go to hell? This is height of inequality. If I presume that my way is the only way to heaven and your way is the way to devil, then in that case, I am being totally unequal. How can I claim this equality in terms of Rousseau alone, that all men are born equal? All men may be born equal, but all men are not believing in the equality of humanity. If you are believing that some will go to hell and some will go to heaven according to what they believe, then you are not believing in inequality. And if you are not believing in equality, then there can be no fraternity. That is why many verses of the Holy Quran forbid you to spend your time with the non-Muslims. Don't spend your time with non-Muslims. Don't eat with them. Don't drink with them. There are many verses. This is because they believe in this distinction. So, taking into account the cultural inequality, the cultural consequences of philosophic belief today is the most important thing. And in India, it had a beginning with the idea of monotheism. Then, as a consequence, that belief in a way of worship in which there is an idol is also wrong. See, this is or it is not so good. And now Hindus have to cure themselves of this idea, which we developed in the 19th century, that Saguna Upasana is inferior and Nirguna Upasana is higher. And as a matter of fact, very often, many Advaitic and Vedantic schools of thought fall into this trap. Where they say, well, Murti Puja is a way of reaching. It is something to be shed. It is something to be crossed over. Now, that is not the truth. All the texts in Indian tradition show that Sagun and Nirgun are the same, because if the creator and the creation are the same, then there is no tattvic or essential distinction between Nirgun and Sagun, Roop and Aroop. And therefore, worship of the Saguna cannot be in any way inferior. फिर कैसे होगा inferior? That's why Tulsidas, right up to, you see, Tulsidas begins his Ramayana by worshipping Ram as Nirguna. When he starts his Mangala Charan, in the Mangala Charan, the last verse is on Rama as Nirguna. If I can recall the verse, Ramakhya Misham Harim Vande Yan Maya Vashavarta Vishwam Akhilam Brahmadi Deva Sura Yat Sattvad Amrishaiva Bhati Sakalam Rajjau Yatha Aher Brahma, जिसकी ताकत से, जिसके प्रभाव से रस्सी भी सांप लगने लगती है माया के कारण, जिसकी माया के कारण. Tulsidas uses Shankara's classic Drishtanta, the same, because he wants to say exactly what Adi Shankara is saying, that he is Ramakhya Misham Harim, my Ram, my God, who is called Rama. Who is he? Yat Sattvad Amrishaiva Bhati Sakalam Rajjau Yatha Hera Brahma Yat but Yat Pada Plavameva Ekahi Bhavam Bodhe Sthitir Shavatam. But whose feet are a boat to take me across this Bhavasagar, this Sansar. Yat pada plavamev ek mev hi bhavam bodhe sthiti ishavatam. Those who want to go across this ocean of suffering or ocean of illusion, his charana, but his charan cannot be nirguna. Therefore, he is sagun, and because he is sagun, therefore the whole Ramcharitmanas. And at the end, what does he say? Janma janma rati Ram chahu, padana chahu nirvan. I want to be born as Tulsi again and again and worship him as Ram. Janma janma rati Ram pad, janma janma rati Ram pad, padana chahu nirvan. I don't want nirvana, I don't want moksha. I don't want the nirguna enlightenment. He doesn't want it because the saguna enlightenment is the same as nirguna enlightenment. So this equality of creation and created is the crux of Indian civilization. And textually it is seen right from Rig Veda, 10th mandala, till the very latest time, till the latest rishis like Sri Aurobindo, who believed in descent of the supramental. See? Descent of the supramental in something concrete, which is mental, social, Matri Shakti. That's why the mother built the Matri Mandir in Aurobindo. The Matri Mandir. Because that is the only agency of change, Prakriti. You know, Shiva Shakti Ayukto Yadi. Change will come through Shakti. And if you believe that their creation is separate from the Creator, then woman is separate from man. Right? Then there is a gender conflict. Then there is no gender unity. But if you understand the whole development of Indian philosophical system throughout the ages and see the fineness of the unity of the male and the female principle, then you will seek a separate solution to the gender inequality, something entirely different from as it is being sought in Euro-American societies. Euro-American societies are seeking a very different solution. You will or we will not seek that solution. We'll seek a very different solution. Of course, there will be conflict because they would not like you to seek a different solution. They'll enforce it all the time. That's why our Harvard-educated judges enforced the solution in Sabarimala. Because they cannot understand the concept of brahmacharya. You see, Sabarimala has a Ayyappa who is a lifetime brahmachari, Naishtik brahmachari. And Naishtik brahmachari cannot come into sight of women. Now, many liberal sadhus, very liberal philosophical Indians say that, well, if sarvamidam khalu brahma, then women are Brahma, men are Brahma, Ayyappa is Brahma, you are also Brahma, then what is the difference? Then why this distinction? Why this gender inequality? But that's not the issue. Because any kind of worship is based on exclusion for the sake of worship, not exclusion for the sake of demeaning somebody, right? But for the sake of conducting that particular ritual. So if I want to study the Bhagavad Gita carefully, then it is not advisable to take a glass of good French wine before studying it. That's not the way of studying it. Because you need a different state of concentrated mind. Saying that I'll not take a glass of French wine because I have to study Bhagavad Gita, that doesn't mean that the French are bad, that French wine is bad. You can take it after your dinner. Even Ayurveda prescribes taking asavas. So, the same thing is not excluded at another moment, but it is excluded for a certain practice, for a certain ritual. Now, this whole concept of ritual is related to the Hindu mode of worship. Of course, it was done, and it is still done partially in Greek system, Greek Orthodox Christian system, Catholic systems. See? And it is something which is artificially created by exclusion and by acceptance of certain symbols and reaffirming those symbols mentally. See, when you go into a church and you take the bread and wine, right, as flesh and blood of Christ, then is it literally flesh and blood of Christ? No. It is symbolic. So it is an inclusion. It is an imagination. It is a concentration. Similarly, in the ritual of not entering the temple of Ayyappa, while a woman is in a procreative state or avastha, which is from age of 10, 11 to 50, symbolically, is worship of brahmacharya. The concept of brahmacharya has to be understood. The Christian concept of brahmacharya is sexlessness. So, for a Christian priest, not now, after Reformation, but before that, there was no marriage, right? He had to be celibate. And if the priest could castrate himself, that was even better. There were examples in Christian history. But the Hindu concept of brahmacharya is not absolute brahmacharya. It is brahmacharya according to the occasion and need. So there is brahmacharya during the student period of total abstinence. Then there is brahmacharya which practices restraint and abstinence periodically during your lifetime, your avastha of grahastha. And there is different brahmacharya code for vanaprastha and again a different code for sannyasta. So the Hindu concept of brahmacharya is ritual according to your avastha. And worship of brahmacharya in general is one major method of cultivating spiritual power in the Hindu system. And Ayyappa temple symbolizes worship of brahmacharya, which our Supreme Court cannot understand because the influential judges among the Supreme Court are Harvard educated. They are following a different system altogether. It has nothing to do with gender discrimination.